All right, well, let's get started. Um, and hopefully we can, you know, have a nice casual time here and, learn from each other. Today, we're talking about our real-time department and exploring some of the different career paths and things we can do within this area because it's a very difficult to explain what real-time 3D is. And we have a whole department at CG Spectrum about it. So this is our opportunity to talk about it, but also talk with other mentors in our school and find out more about what they do. I'll start with my own introduction. My name is Simon Warwick. I'm the department head of this real time. I've been in the industry for almost 20 years, working as I started off as a character animator. So animation's been kind of my foundation. And then I moved into a technical role as a technical animator and worked at Silicon Knights and then Rocksteady Studios. Managed to work on Batman Arkham City, which was a lot of fun, very exciting. And then moved into my own studio called Collectivision, and then got hired at CG Spectrum in 2015 to be a mentor and working with the school to try and help encourage and bring more students in and make the school a solid place for people to rely on for education. And it's been quite an exciting ride. And now we've got over 20 mentors in our department alone, helping us teach real time and make sure that we cover all these different types of career paths that we're going to talk about later. Um, okay, so today's schedule, what we're going to do in our webinar here is we're going to do panelist introductions, make sure we talk about everyone who's here. And then we're going to discuss a little bit about what CG Spectrum is and how our courses work and define what real time is, or hopefully try to define what it is. And then we're going to come back to the panelists and let them have a bit of time to talk about what their knowledge and their experience and what their particular part of the industry that they sort of feel comfortable in, and let them talk about it a bit. And then we'll discuss some of the differences between this industry and other industries and do a little bit of panel discussions as we cross between the two of them. And then at the end, we'll hopefully have some questions that you guys have lined up for us. If you have any questions during the time of the talk, don't be afraid to throw them out there while it's still in context to what we're talking about. So that we can, because it's fun to talk about things. I know the panelists will enjoy having nice discussion points while we're getting into a different type of subject or something. So I'm going to start with Victoria. We're going to pass it over and find out a little bit about her background and what her experience is. So go ahead, Victoria.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria. I do not have a 10 out of 10 headshot like Simon does. I took a picture while hiking and like, okay, that belongs on LinkedIn. We'll call it a day. But yeah, so I'm a senior technical artist and a Unreal instructor as well as a mentor for Real-Time 3D here at CG Spectrum. I did a little back and forth in my career. I've worked in both virtual productions and games, the virtual production and games, so I consider myself more of a games technical artist. I started off studying game development at SCAD in Atlanta, Georgia. From there, went and worked in a mix of corporate and marketing, AR and VR products for a while. Eventually switched over to virtual production, where I worked on Obi-Wan, Ant-Man, Avatar, which is finally coming out today after all of these years, as well as Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon and a few other smaller productions. And then most recently, I was a senior technical artist on Palia. And yeah, a bit of back and forth. Sometimes I've worked as a gameplay programmer, sometimes as a pipeline engineer, and sometimes as a technical artist, but it's been a fun mix.
That was
Yes.
great. Yeah, you got lots of experience. No doubt about it. Okay, so we're gonna move over to Cesar and welcome and feel free to give a little bit of your background there.
Hi everyone. I am Cesar. I am another real-time mentor here in CG Spectrum. I was working. I am architect, and I was working for a long time, 11 years or so, in a construction company, and then I switched to my desired 3D career. And since then, I've been doing personal projects and professional projects in architectural visualization. I started working in architectural visualization. I am a 3D generalist, and I started working too in teaching Unreal Engine, and now I am working in virtual production doing live 3D shows, broadcast with LED volumes and chroma sets. So yeah, it's I have found, according to what 3D generalists usually do, I have found that broadcasting is quite challenging because you have to solve a lot of problems in a few amount of time, and you have to be quick and have all the ideas real clear to be directly fixing all the problems you can find in a stage. So
Yeah, and it's very cutting edge. So you're sort of experimenting and inventing the process as it goes as well. So it's you're one of the few people out there who have experience with broadcasting in the real-time world.
yeah, here in Spain, I think that there is only a few people doing it. At
Yeah,
least at least with LED volumes. Chroma maybe are a bit more extent, but LED volumes are quite new here in Spain.
yeah, exactly. All
Thank you.
right, and yeah, thanks, Caesar. And then in a very similar context, we'll jump over to Zach, and feel free to talk about what your environment, your background is.
Hello, everybody. My name is Zach. Caesar's expertise is a little intimidating. It's hard to follow up, but I also work in virtual production. I'm a 3D artist. I come from a 2D animation background and live in Atlanta and work with a bunch of different parts of the pipeline. The film world in Atlanta is a little more Wild West, and being a generalist, I typically jump around, but in terms of real time, I've worked a lot in world building for short stories, commercials, worked with LED volumes, real-time keying sets, and a lot of fun IC stuff like that. Did some post work in Unreal Engine. I've worked with Epic Games on a few projects for real-time stuff. Lots of fun, lots of different parts of Unreal Engine. It truly is a rabbit hole, so you can get caught up in a bunch of different parts of it. But I'm excited to tell you guys a little bit more about what I do in virtual production and ICVFX.
That's awesome. Thanks, Zach. Yeah, we got lots of things to share for us for sure. All right, we'll move over to Nicklas, who is our department head for visualization, and it's a whole nother department, which is very similar, but also very different. So go ahead, Nicklas.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, as Simon said, I am Nicklas, and I'm kind of the odd one out here, since I am not from the real-time department at all. In fact, I am head of department for our visualization department, which is a fairly new department as well. My background goes way back because of weird coincidences and everything. I actually, for my age, not to brag or anything, I started in 3D. I just started thinking about it when you guys were introducing yourselves. I started in 3ds Max R2.5 in 1998 in Windows 95, I think. The weird thing, so I didn't start professionally with that because at that time I was 11 years old. But I was lucky enough that I actually got my own computer in 1990 at the age of like 3. So I've been introduced into the world of graphics and all of those things at a very young age, but always been interested in it as well. So since then, I have my own studio. I have that for like 14 years now, I think. I've been teaching visualization for a long time. Before joining CG Spectrum, which I did just about a year ago now, I was teaching at a school in Denmark called 3D College, where I helped the school get awarded the world's best architectural visualization school 3 years in a row. And I was teaching there for about 10 or 12 years, something like that. And while having my own studio as well on the side, I've been working with motion graphics quite a lot. I've been following I think Zach's background and also Cesar's is very interesting for me because I've actually been I was working in niche markets with LED products and AV productions in general before I started teaching. So I've been doing motion design, motion graphics as well for actually for soccer or football, as we actually call it in the rest of the world. So we were doing commercials, and I think I've done like probably about 1,000 commercials for LED banners on the side of soccer fields and so on as well, and just odd media productions in general. So I have a lot of different weird things that I like to do, and it probably fits my ADHD quite a lot, just jumping around. And yeah, I've been a photographer as well for quite a while, and as you can see on the list, I've been doing a ton for Chaos as a V-Ray instructor, and co-hosting their 24 Hours of Chaos as well. So yeah.
That's cool. There's some stuff there I didn't know about you, so it's kind of neat. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And we'll talk more about different areas of your department in the slides ahead. So that should be good to hear. And then, so this, let's talk about CG Spectrum as a whole. And we're one of the top ranked online schools. We provide different departments of education related to the same sort of fields. So animation, digital painting, game development, 3D modeling, VFX, virtual production, and 3D visualization. Those are all very similar, and it makes for a nice environment to work together because we all have a lot of very similar interests and a lot of nice crossovers. So the school as a whole works together nicely. We have 170 film and game industry mentors within our community, and who are working and mentoring together. I know with our department specifically, we have like over 20 different mentors just to cover all the different directions for this type of career path. And we have an 80% job success rate, which, basically our goal as a school and our reputation is driven on the fact that, our students need to be successful for us to be able to, be a school that's useful to advertise for. So our goal is to make sure that you have success, and it's proving over the 8 years I've been here, we've definitely been working hard to build up that reputation. And we have students all across the world, so it's very interesting to see the communities and all our different backgrounds, but we all have a very common interest, and we all work together. It's actually quite a nice progressive community that we have. And then we have even development services to help make sure that the students who are going through our course have access to Holly, who is one of our career services people that will make sure that you are focused and you got your resume and your thought process and delivery for getting your employment working. So it's very helpful there. And then back again to our online community, which is a really big part of our school. It's hard to advertise and it's hard to talk about why a community is useful until you actually see it and experience it. And I think that's one of our very strong suits for our school, is that we have over 4,500 people in our Slack community, and we work very hard with hiring TAs and making sure that our community is active. And it's one of the things that as mentors we always realize is that it's your contacts and your communication with other people within the industry that really is where the true value is, and we don't want to lose that just being an online school. So it was a big priority for us to make sure that everybody comes back together again and has a way to be able to communicate with each other and share each other and collaborate in projects as well. So I think that's a really nice piece of what our online school is. So here's our different departments that we have. You can see virtual productions snuck in here under game development, but I think technically it also fits under visual effects. And I mean, technically it spreads across a lot of different departments. So, but these are definitely areas that you could look for courses, and we have, all different department heads and mentors and people that specialize in these areas that can help you through through these types of courses. Specifically with Realtime, we have essentially two different types of programs that are two different types of course selections. We have the Essentials, which gives you the foundations of what you need to do to be able to get into a real-time sort of environment. And then we have our three term, which each term is about 12 weeks, our 3-term course for our foundations, which is basically allows you to specialize and focus on a particular aspect that you find most interesting. And we try to make sure that the area that you're interested in going to, we try to cater to make sure that during our Q&As and the mentoring that we have with you is following that path that you want to go in. It's a difficult course because of the fact that we have such a spread of career paths. But I think, but we work really hard to make sure that each term we put a different mentor with you to make sure that that mentor is specializing in the topic that we're talking about. And we have like world building and cinematography and pre-visualization, as well as in our essentials, we have a whole topic about technical animation. All these subjects that I think are key and to be able to make a successful student in this industry is laid across this type of course. And in the future, we're always working towards trying to find ways to reevaluating ways to be able to approach this type of career path because it is changing all the time. So in the future, in the near future, we're going to have a bit of a rearrangement of how we're doing things to make sure that everyone is getting the most in their time spent with CG Spectrum. So here we are talking about what is real-time 3D, and it's a difficult thing to explain to people, but the key element between real-time 3D and traditional pipelines is that real-time maintains a very fast rendering frame rate. And by doing that, it opens up a whole bunch of opportunities for artists and developers to be able to create work in a completely new and innovative way. And if you talk to people who work in the industry, they all definitely would love to walk away from the traditional rendering pipeline workflows because it's very slow and clumsy. And they very much enjoy working in the real-time environments because you get to see in context what it is that you're actually working on. And this whole aspect is changing rapidly right now. Every month, basically, something comes out and it's like, oh, look, you don't necessarily have to do this in the old way. Now there's a new way to approach, whether it's animation or rendering or lighting or visualizing. It's all transforming. And I think that's what's so exciting about this career path is that as a student, you have a great opportunity to master something that the majority of the industry hasn't even explored yet, and become a very important role inside of a production pipeline. So that's the idea of what real-time is about. It's just about the speed of rendering and the opportunities that it produces. So that means we have to work inside of a game engine, which traditionally everybody thinks it's just for games, but that's what's changed in the last few years. And it actually allows us to do much more. And we can see this with the panelists that we have here. We get into film and broadcasting and visualization, AR, VR. There's a lot of different directions that are opening up, and it's allowing for a very interesting career path. And even when we talk about the different types of DCC software or digital content creation software, modeling, texturing, sculpting, rigging, this is all it's all changing and new and interesting. And what are we going to do next? I don't know. It's a very up in the air kind of thing. So here's a whole overview of all these different types of careers you can do. I find this super overwhelming because it's like, wow, you could just put you're just putting everything on the list. But it's true. There's tons of different directions that you can do. And what I like about our panelists here is that you can really spot all these different paths. My background personally is the technical animation, and that's another career path on top of that. So there is lots of opportunity here, and because it's so new and interesting, that there's lots of potential for people getting into the industry. So we're going to start with talking about games and technical art as one of the areas of what we're going to explore. And I know Victoria has sort of this kind of, she has a very strong grounding in a lot of the technical art aspects. She's actually helping us build one of our advanced materials course content, and is doing a fantastic job of bringing to light all these complex problems and challenges that artists have in the industry, and making it in a way that's very approachable. So Victoria, did you have something that you wanted to talk about and bring through to discuss on this?
Go ahead and jump into this slide here. I guess we'll talk a little bit about both just games and technical art as well here, because I think I'm the only one, at least in this room, from the game side of things. And though, everything here is, of course, in real time, but on the game side of things, we have a few differences that kind of bring some unique challenges to the table. The major difference here is that everything we make in games has to be interactive, which sounds like a small difference, but in reality has some pretty huge implications. It means the levels we build, well, they have to usually you're not just viewing them from specific angles. Players are able to run around in them. Everything has to be functional in some way, from making sure you don't fall through the world to making sure you know where to go and what to do, and that everything works under a million possible scenarios that could happen, and that it all runs on the computer in your home or your console or on your phone sometimes. And I personally really, really like this challenge because I like delivering an experience to players. Specifically, I work in technical art in games, which I like to describe as and you'll get varying definitions here depending on who you ask, but I just say it's the halfway point in between engineering and 3D art a lot of times. And so that can involve a lot of specialties. Some of the most common ones I've kind of listed out here. It involves things like procedural generation, so we can build out worlds faster, tools programming to help with exposing things to artists and making sure things are done consistently and everything fits within the restrictions it needs to actually be functional in a game. Working in gameplay systems when it involves things that are really art heavy, like maybe a dynamic weather system, automation, pipeline development, profiling and optimization. That's making sure your game is most of the time just making sure the game can run fast on your computer at home and fits within a certain package size. Shaders and graphics, that's going to be creating the best way to describe that, the actual surfaces on objects, and involves a lot of going back and forth between code, math, and art. So it's like this weird technical art specific area. Simulations, in some areas, technical art involves animation and rigging as well. That's not really the side I'm on, but that can also, I guess that's what the side Simon was on, tech animation. Then there's real-time VFX, which sometimes if like you're in a game studio, that's just called VFX because they don't separate it from other VFX. But yeah, a lot of variety there. I really like it just because I get to work in games and I get to write code and also be involved in art at the same time. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, everybody's got their own interests and their own abilities and their own talents. And not everybody is really into certain aspects of technical art in some areas, but might really enjoy other elements. And what you've covered here and what you were talking about is the fact that this is like many jobs, not just one job, and each one has their own specialization of how they can master that area.
It does tend to be kind of a jack of all trades role a little bit. I see a lot of generalists attracted to technical art, and most of the time, like occasionally you'll see someone who purely works in tools programming or purely works in real-time VFX and making stuff in Niagara all day. But a lot of times it's more general programmer artists who end up like picking up 5 or 6 of these areas, or maybe 3 or 4 of them, and then you get to jump between a lot of stuff throughout the day.
It's true. That's a good point. Even Lightfoot is like that too. He's like, well, today I guess I'm doing rigging, which wasn't necessarily what he was normally doing. So yeah, you're basically solving problems is the key aspect. Okay, so let's keep moving. And now we're going to move into broadcasting and some of the challenges and interesting elements there. I think this is for Cesar to cover. So
yeah,
feel free,
perfect.
Cesar.
So in this case, Unreal is the perfect tool for doing this kind of stuff that involves merging real-time footage captured with a camera in a stage or even in outdoors, and mixing in real time in the same place all the 3D content generated by Unreal. So and for this. The main topic, maybe the main purpose of doing this is for creating virtual sets or having a real talent talking about some news or any certain aspect, all completely surrounded by a 3D generated content with a complete environment. So the main tool for doing this traditionally is having the talent in a green screen or in a blue screen, or even in the Dune film, they used orangish screen in order to fix the lighting, and removing that color from the footage and replacing by a 3D content. And traditionally, it was done in post-production. But for broadcasting, you need to do this in real time. You're going to clean the color, the background color. You need to clean the green color from the reflections and from the talent that is being bleeding by the color due to the light. And it's a cheap solution, because you can build a green screen pretty fast, and you don't need to have a very specific technical elements for having it, but it has a huge work in post-processing. You need to take big care about color bleeding in this case. And the main advantage now with the LED volumes that are used for broadcasting and film is that when you record the talent, you record already the 3D rendered image in a LED volume behind him. So you don't need to clean the light bleeding, and what you record is a completely clean image. You don't need to have any post-production on it. So for live TV shows and for films recently, is a pretty good solution, because it allows you to not to need a huge post-production after recording, and for live shows is a must. But the counterpart of this is that LED solutions are pretty expensive, right? And even you don't need to create a whole virtual set surrounding the talent or a complete environment. Even you can use only AR content in order to complete or to support a certain information about something that the talents are talking in a table or something like that. And the other kind of work that are related to this kind of content generation. It doesn't involve real-time recording with talent, but creating TV shows or educational TV shows, or recreating content that, for example, a temple or an ancient building that has been destroyed in time. And you can recreate it in AR in order to show it in how it was in its time. And you can use it even for VR experience, because now you will know by Apple, they have released a new headset that uses mixed reality. So in that case, all the 3D content is real time mixed with the real footage of the cameras. So maybe if I can show, Simon, I can show. I will have some take snaps from a video that one of our scenes that we have created recently in Christmas. So if I can show it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop share.
I think that this scene I will show only one. Resumes more or less the topics involved in real time broadcasting. So this is the scene we created. What you are seeing here in real time is the real floor. Here we didn't have an LED volume for the floor and the talent, but all of the rest is real time generated. But I don't know if you see my mouse. More or less,
Yep.
this area here is is captured by the camera. It's a LED volume. And after that, we have another engine that fills outside this area, outside, with the rendered image. It's called set extension. But everything you see in this area here doesn't need to be fixed in post-production. You don't need to replace anything because this is projected in an LED volume behind the talent. So I talked before that this is a quite challenge because everything you are seeing here involves a lot of areas of expertise. You need to rig sometimes some characters in order to play this kind of animations. You need to play physics, for example, for the cards. And now you will see some text here throwing up these GIFs. I will. Yeah, these kind of elements that plays directly as she is talking needs to be played in real time because you never know when a talent will tell something. So you cannot have a strictly timeline prepared for it because maybe the talent have spent more time talking about a certain thing, and you need to trigger it in real time as she is talking. So this is the main challenge playing this kind of stuff. This kind of physics, or even this one. I really enjoy doing this one. This is a weather forecast.
It's great. Looks awesome. So much stuff going on.
This is all about blueprinting. This is insane.
Oh yeah, right.
But Unreal is pretty amazing because allow you to do this without needing any other software. So yeah, it's very fun to play with. Sometimes it's stressful, but
do you find that the limitations of your frame rate is a big element of what you have to deal with?
It's a very important thing to take into account because you need to play in 50 frames per second, and depending on the environment, it's not as easy as it sounds.
And also trying to keep that consistently across the whole broadcast, like all of a sudden particle effects or whatever would maybe all of a sudden ruin your
speed. You cannot have spikes.
Right,
spikes. Even with one frame. If you have one frame below 50, your screen will tilt.
Right. It won't match up perfectly anymore. Yeah, that can probably be a big part of your what it's like all these great ideas you want to do, but then what is it you're able to do is the real question. It's very good. Thanks for sharing that little piece there too, because it's nice to have some visuals to go with dialogue so we can understand what it is that you're trying to do. Okay, so we'll move over to what Zach has to talk about with the ICVFX pipeline, which is in a lot of similarity to what we were talking about there before, but this one can be done in a different context. So go ahead, Zach.
Hello. So Cesar kind of touched on, some aspects about virtual production that I'll kind of get into a little bit as well. There is ICVX and virtual production, and ICVFX is a bit more broad of a term. So typically when I'm going, like everything I speak on right here will be ICVFX, but it'll also be virtual production. And some other examples of ICVFX are like forced perspective and miniatures, matte paintings, VFX that you're capturing in camera, but it also includes virtual production. And there are, a few types of virtual production, different use cases for it. There's, like Cesar mentioned, LED volumes and real-time keying sets and capturing in-camera VFX for backgrounds, but there's also production reference virtual production. So an example of this would be in the film Real Steel. I'm not sure if everyone has seen it, but it's about a bunch of robots, boxing. Wolverine's in it, and it's a fun movie. But one of the hurdles they had, and this is one of the first use cases of virtual production, is they have a bunch of CGI robots fighting, and they're actually filming this footage. So one of the problems they were having is these cameramen didn't know where to look. So one of the first use cases of it was they had pre-built out these robots fighting in these animations, and were feeding it from Unreal Engine into these camera operators' viewports, so they had something to look at in reference to what they're filming. Because I'm sure everyone can imagine it's hard to just imagine a robot getting punched. But there also is production, virtual production. An example of reference virtual production that I have done is we were filming miniature bottles of alcohol company, and all of the vice presidents of the company were miniature avatars speaking about these products as we're actually filming real bottles with real backgrounds, but they're CGI little mini avatars talking about it. So something we did was we used Unreal Engine and hooked up a VR headset to the camera and had a bunch of witness cameras to set up camera tracking. So basically, these camera operators knew where these pre-built animations and CGI were in reference to what they were filming. And virtual production can be extremely helpful just in terms of reference. And this happens a lot on green screen sets, where even though you're filming on green screen, you want to have an idea of what this background is going to look like. So you would use Unreal Engine simply for live keying reference to get an idea of what we're looking at. And then it would be sent to post, and all the 3D and comp work would be done in post. But it's really helpful for directors and DPs who can just get an idea of what this is going to look at, because as your project scales, directors and DPs don't know how something's going to look at the end of the day. And having that on-set, reference for them helps them adjust lighting, helps them direct talent, and can be really helpful. In terms of getting into the, real LED style virtual production, there's a lot of aspects that go into it. And again, it's really helpful for DPs and directors to, modify a set in real time. So a lot of the work I do on set is with the virtual art department, and we build out worlds, and we'll I've worked on short films and commercial work, and having these, I work alongside directors and DPs who will come up to me like, hey, can we move the world a little bit this way? And can we fix the lighting here a bit? And it's a very interactive experience that most directors and DPs don't get the chance to do, but we're now working in real time. Another aspect that goes into virtual production is camera tracking. So as some of you may know, the way virtual production works is you obviously have a camera. And when you turn your camera, your world moves with it. So you're getting a real-time background in camera. And to get that done, you need to have real-time camera tracking. Most of the time this will happen in post, but in live virtual production sets, it happens in real time. And there's a few different ways you can do real-time camera tracking, or a few different techniques. There are reflective points you can put on your screens. I'm forgetting the word, infrared reflective, points, and you have a witness camera mounted on your actual camera pointing up or pointing to the side, and you don't see in camera these reflective points, but the witness infrared camera can see these. And it's basically real-time tracking these points in space to get your frustum, is what we call it in virtual production. Another example, a technique of camera tracking would be witness cameras, kind of like how I mentioned before. And you would have a reflective infrared mount that you would put on your camera. And you have a variety of witness infrared cameras that are tracking where this camera is in space. And that's just another little technique for you. Something that's extremely important, and Cesar kind of touched on it a little bit, probably the biggest hump to get over when it comes to virtual production, is world optimization. The bigger your screen is, the more computing power you need to run it. And it could get a little messy if your world isn't optimized to run in real time. Thankfully, in film, we typically only have to run at 24 frames per second versus Cesar's 50. But it could be a little bit, there are a lot of hiccups because directors and DPs and creatives on set ask a lot more from their virtual art department typically than something in broadcast field. So optimizing your world is probably one of the, if not the most important thing that comes to virtual production, because the second you drop a frame rate, your take is gone. And you don't want to get on the bad side of your director. You don't want to get bad side of any creatives on set, because if your world isn't optimized, it could lead to Unreal Engine crashes. And then all of a sudden you have a set full of 50 people looking at a group of 5 people on set, like, what's going on? And that's a position you don't want to be in. There are a lot of different elements, you can work into virtual production, like interactive and dynamic lighting. There is, you can actually, like Cesar mentioned, you can play sequences to play animations during virtual production. And you could also hook up DMX lighting to virtual production. So you could have a sequence running. And for example, on a short film we worked on, we had someone being abducted by an alien, and he's looking up and he has this huge blue light on him. And you see this giant alien ship coming in from the back until it gets over him, and this whole blue light gets on. And that's something we hooked up through DMX lighting. So we would play our sequence of our alien ship coming in, and then eventually would trigger our DMX lighting, lighting up our, character on screen. Virtual cameras and lenses, that kind of falls under camera tracking. That typically is every time you work with a new lens, every time you work with a new camera on set, these cameras and lenses need to be calibrated to the wall. All focal lengths, all of the distortion that goes in the cameras, you want to have this calibrated with your wall so you get as most accurate picture as possible. It also determines the size of your frustum, which is the interactive, what you're seeing of the screen that the camera captures. And if you don't need as big of a frustum, you don't need as much computing power, and that's a way to optimize your world again. Virtual production is just like a whole can of worms, and it is a real-time, VFX industry that is like the kind of answer I saw you ask a question, Vera. It is kind of made up of generalists and, very niche specialties. When it comes to gaming, you typically have a lot bigger teams, and this again depends on the size of your production, but virtual production on set artists, you typically have a lot smaller teams, so you're made up of generalists, and you're figuring a lot of stuff out on set and behind the scenes. All this post work that we're used to just pushing at the back of the pipeline, we're now front loading all of this work. It's not getting rid of any work throughout the production process. You're just doing all that work that you're going to do in post and front loading it to the front end. So the more time you get working in worlds or optimizing worlds, the smoother things will go. But as some of us may know, the production process doesn't always let that happen, and sometimes you just make it work.
What I really like about I didn't expect you to get into some of the details, which was great that you did, was that you kind of clarified what the hardware is that you get to actually worry about. I know some people that look into ICVFX and stuff wonder whether our course content is covering like how to set up an LED wall, but I mean, like, that just seems like something that a technician would do in the beginning rather than something that a daily job that you would be worried about. But you still have to worry about tracking cameras and
Right.
and how the lenses work and stuff.
And you typically have an LED tech on set that kind of handles, that if a panel would go out or something would happen, they would handle that. And they have more of an LED expertise versus, software or Unreal Engine or real-time VFX expertise. They typically don't know what's really going on under the hood, and they just kind of focus on the LEDs. But it is, super helpful to have that knowledge and know how this stuff works, because, it kind of all plays a part in optimizing your world. And and determining what issue you may be having on set.
Yeah, well, that's true too. A lot of troubleshooting,
Yeah.
hardware troubleshooting. That was great. Thanks, Zach, for covering all that. And yeah, let's keep moving forward here. We'll look into what ArchViz and product visualization as a department. And we'll let Nicklas have a little bit of time to talk about that too.
Thank you. Yeah, so one of the challenges I think we have in terms of visualization and the visualization department in general, and just as a career in itself as well, excuse me, is the whole aspect of architectural visualization especially doesn't really sound that great. What I mean by it is that when you talk about games and movies, and when that's usually what people think about when they think about 3D in general, or even just art, at least in this context. So one of the challenges we definitely have is that how do we make architectural visualization or product visualization or whatever sexy? It's because it doesn't have the same appeal as working for, you know, an Avengers movie or Avatar, like Victoria, even though that took probably forever in terms of actually doing the work versus now that it's getting released, I think today. But in terms of, because many people just think about ArchViz as it's just buildings, right? And to an extent, you're right. But I think the exciting part about ArchViz, ProcViz, and visualization in general is the generalist approach to it. As you might have gathered from my previous experience, is that you can really dive into a lot of different fields at the same time. And just to elaborate a little bit on the question that Vera asked earlier, was about if it's worth specializing, or you can have multiple specialties, or you should have one specialty, or more of a generalist approach when talking about real time. Now, real time, and the question was aimed towards VFX and games a little bit more, but it really does depend on the career path that you choose. In some paths, you might have a lot more benefit on being more specialized. I could imagine in paths like Victoria is doing. They're a bit more specialized in that regards. But again, even Victoria is doing more of a generalist approach in terms of doing technical art. And Simon even went over more to a technical part as well, doing more generalist approach as far as I know. But you started in more of a specialized field in terms of animation, right? So there's literally both options are there. I think for Unreal specifically and real time, you do see a bit more generalist now than you do as a whole in, let's take VFX as the example. And visualization is basically the same. Like the most demand is definitely for generalists. It's a lot smaller in terms of team size and all those. So it has to be one or two people who can wear multiple hats. You need to just, you know, one day you're doing rigging, the next day you're doing lighting, and the next day you're doing animation, and the next day you're doing texturing, and then you're modeling or set design or whatever it might be. So it really does change quite a lot. And I think that's the exciting part about visualization, is that you get to touch on all of these different fields. You need to be pretty good at all of it. You obviously cannot master everything. I kind of used to say that you're a jack of all trades, but master of none. But you really do need to be able to get it to a certain level, depending on obviously the type of projects that you're doing. We do use real-time quite a lot in architectural and product visualization. We're seeing it more and more. Obviously, it gives us an excuse to do more interactive stuff, something that really gets users to be able to touch and feel and see and explore all of these different visualizations that are done. And it could be even in products, like the image that is here on the presentation. That's a PS5 controller that I rendered out, and that's done completely in real time. And we did that as an animation, just as a product test, but you really couldn't tell that if it was done in an offline renderer or a real-time renderer. In this case, I did use path tracing in Unreal Engine, so cheating. It's not really real time, but the engine itself, it's done in a real time engine. I was able to see the results real time, so it's much faster, much easier to change lighting, to change properties of the materials, all of those things. And that's the important part, is the speed of how you're working. And it doesn't have to be Unreal Engine either when it comes to ArcViz and ProductViz as well. And even, games, as many people probably know, there are a lot of engines out there. Unreal just happened to be fairly popular right now, especially if you go into ICVFX and virtual production, all those things. It's probably the biggest and so far one of the few only options out there. So most people are going with that. For ArcViz and ProductViz, you could also go with Chaos products like Vantage. We are a Chaos academic partner, so that makes sense for us to look at programs like that as well. And the advantage is that if you're using other products from them, like V-Ray, Corona, and so on, it's the same software behind all of it. So you can just go from offline rendering, literally click a button, and then you're in real-time rendering without having to change anything, with most features supported. More and more are getting supported of the specialized features as well. So that actually helps quite a lot. And you can swap back and forth. So you get the benefits of offline rendering in terms of quality or fidelity and tools available, but you get the real-time aspect of seeing what you're doing as you do it and getting almost perfect results in camera or whatever you would say, or in your viewports. And then to avoid too much noise or whatever, you would then offline rendering afterwards, which you do see a lot in game engines as well. A lot of those great demos and cinematics done in Unreal Engine, a lot of them aren't actually real time. They're made real time, but they're rendered out in hours or whatever for a cinematic, because you need to crunch those frames just to get rid of noise and all of those things. Obviously, if it's for virtual production and broadcast and so on, you can't do that. It actually has to be real time. So you need to find ways to get around those issues. But yeah, we actually do work with quite a lot of different things. Obviously, you can import models from other softwares and scene setups and so on, and go between setups depending on what types of software you're coming from. 3ds Max is what I'm using, and it's quite popular in ArcViz and ProductViz as well. But you definitely do see people use Blender, Maya, whatever. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Whatever gets the job done, really. There is a benefit to using the most popular software across an industry as well. If you're going to work with other companies, or you get jobs at other companies, they might use one software versus another. I did some work for a company in Germany, and it turned out they used Modo as their primary DCC, which was very new to me. And if you haven't tried Modo, the learning curve for that program is stupid. So I wouldn't recommend doing that ever. And nobody could even explain at the company why they chose that path. I guess it's because of the founder. That was what they were used to. So it just kind of stuck. And I think that's kind of what ends up happening at a lot of companies as well. This is why you're not seeing Blender take on as fast in terms of the bigger companies and so on. They're already invested into Maya probably, or whatever it might be. So it'll take time if you're rooting for Blender to get more and more popular. But it's being used as a tool on the side, and that's the case for visualization as well. But yeah, I just want to mention here at the end of it as well that even though ArcViz is probably the more popular or the more known visualization career path, there's obviously also product visualization, where we see a lot of automotive stuff. And the not so often mentioned is industrial and medical visualization as well. Those are huge fields in themselves. You do see a lot in terms of medical for VR, AR, and so on, to help training people and upskilling staff. So for VR experiences, so you could literally train surgeons using VR capabilities as well. And it doesn't have to be, educational purposes either. It could also just be to like informative, or it could be whatever. Marketing purposes is usually what we see the most in any type of visualization. So automotive, it could be a lot of the ads you're seeing now for new cars coming out. A lot of them are done in real time, Unreal Engine or whatever. Some of them are obviously offline as well, but most of them are renders. Even though they look like photographs or video of a car, it is like 99% sure probably done on a computer, and you wouldn't be able to tell. Even if there's people in it, doesn't matter. That's probably just a virtual production stage with a dummy car or something like that. I mean, they're literally cheating all the time because it's so much cheaper. It's so much easier because you don't actually need the product to exist. You can do all of these things like years in advance as long as you're pretty sure how the product's going to end up looking. And even sometimes you get in trouble for trying to make a product in virtual space in any way, and the actual product actually ends up looking different, which has happened quite a lot as well.
Oh, really?
Good examples, not on that case specifically, but on seeing product and architectural visualization. Go to IKEA's website, no matter what country you're from. About 80% of the images you see on IKEA's website is 100% made on a computer, and that all falls under visualization. Doesn't matter if it's a full scene with perfect lighting and looks like a photograph or whatever, or it's the individual products in terms of a configurator or whatever. It all falls under visualization, and about 80% of all of it is done by a visualization artist. And in fact, I think IKEA has 200 artists in Sweden alone at their headquarters, just doing visualization. And I know for a fact that they're outsourcing to at least, of what I know, 5 companies in Denmark that lives off full time just doing visualization for IKEA as well. They're producing like 80,000 products or something stupid every year in terms of like virtually. They do use photos a bit, but for most of it, it's 3D now. So, if you like IKEA, there's probably a job to get there. But again, that's just one example and something I think most people at least recognize and know what is. So I usually use those guys as great examples.
I'm glad you brought that up because realistically, in my area, I don't know anyone who does visualization, but to actually hear the numbers and hear where it's happening and how many people are required to do these types of jobs, it highlights that this is a career path that has a lot of opportunity. And
Yeah.
and especially if it's moving to real time.
If people are interested in, I guess a lot of the of you guys that are participating here and seeing this webinar, you're probably interested in real time. So you might have already looked at what Unreal is capable of doing. And if all of you guys saw the what was it? Was it the Epic whatever talk they did when they talked about the new PCG system? They showcased their what's that car called? Rivian? They used a Rivian car for their PCG Forest, so it drove through as a type of demo they used.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
that car looked amazing, right? They used it to showcase, the system itself for the forest and everything, but also the materials, the substrate materials, which are looking amazing as well, which you can now do in Unreal. And that's a pretty good example of what you can now do in terms of product visualization and for automotive purposes as well. I'd say that probably 90% of all the pictures you see of cars on the manufacturer's own website, so Ford, BMW, whatever, it's all probably 3D, most likely. That's all visualization as well. So falls under that banner in reality. So
It's great.
Anyway,
That's very good. Thank you for covering all that because I know it's an important aspect to talk about and not much gets heard, at least not in my circles. So it's nice to have you here representing that.
it's kind of hidden, right? That's the issue. It's supposed to look like photos. So how would you know when you see it?
That's true though. It's supposed to be hidden, but that's their job right there. Okay, so let's move on to the next panel here. And this is about it's kind of meant to be a bit more of an open-ended conversation. I think we can maybe start addressing some of the questions that are coming in as well. But the differences, the industry differences and the types of projects, we've been definitely already discussing this as we went through each of the different panelists and their kind of areas. And I know that there's plenty more to be discussed, but this is a chance, I guess, for everybody to kind of have a chat. We can talk more openly. I know I'm glad that a few of you already addressed Vera's questions here with multiple specialties, being a generalist in the industry, and the importance of that. My personal experience in the games industry, when you work in a studio that's really big, you become very specialized. So I was pretty much just stuck in this cinematography, like cinematic technical animator. But you can definitely see how the reach happens really quick. You're basically bridging between two different multiple different departments, and that's your role as a technical artist. So immediately you're starting to look at other people's problems and figure out whether it's their responsibility or our responsibility. And the smaller the studio gets, the more and more generalists you have to be, and more valuable you are. But I think one of the important rule of thumb that we always come back to when we talk about generalism is if you want to get a job in the industry and you're going for a bigger studio, to get past the door, to get into the door, and you don't have any kind of like anybody vouching for you, it's really nice to have an area that you can say, I mastered this area, I'm really good. And if you sit me down in the studio, I can get that job done really good, and you don't have to worry about me. That's sort of been our focus as a school, to be able to get people past that. And then once you're inside the studio, you're building up your contacts, you're learning from everything around you, and you're able to sort of spread wider and build a bigger, more generalist kind of approach. And the people that really like doing the technical art stuff just naturally do this anyways, because they just love learning and love exploring. So it just kind of happens.
Simon, you mind if I add on something there too?
There you go. Perfect.
Yeah. So I guess this industry differences is actually a good point to kind of talk about generalism, being a generalist versus being a specialist, because I do think it varies a little bit between industries as well, even though you do end up with a bit of a range in each. Specifically for me, switching from virtual production from games to virtual production and back to games, I found that, especially on the film TV side of things, you end up with generalists all the way from the very smallest projects to the very biggest projects. People have to reach a little bit broader, artists especially. And then in games, you kind of get an opposite pattern, where in indie games, obviously, if you have a 5-person team, everybody is wearing a lot of hats. There's no way to avoid being a generalist. But because games tend to have a much larger timeline, and there's sometimes more stuff that's actually being done in engine, you start to get super specialized roles I think probably once you pass the 90-person mark in a studio. And the example here was getting into both materials and VFX and also 3D animation. So you can definitely find both of those in the same role in a smaller game studio. Probably under 50 people, you may have somebody doing both of those. But once you start to get to your larger AA and AAA studios, that's when 3D animation is going to be separate from VFX materials. Your dedicated VFX artist may still work on materials, but you'll also have people who may be dedicated material artists. And then 3D animation is also going to get split up just into the people making the characters are separate from the people making rigs, or separate from the people making animations, or separate from the people setting up things in engine and making sure it works with gameplay and making sure their ponytail flies around correctly and it triggers events at the correct time. So that especially starts to get split up at larger studios. But if you want to go the generalist routes and stay spread out, there are positions out there that do that in pretty much all of these industries, I think.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to add to that from their experiences, and how their generalist role is an important aspect, or whether they feel like they're more specializing?
No, for me in broadcasting and TV shows, maybe Zach can correct me. We feed mostly from 3 generalists. We need to do we need to build all the content and the scenes in a short amount of time, and you cannot wait for giving a certain rig to a certain department, because you have to solve it in 2 hours. We need to create content maybe in 3-4 hours to deliver it in the show that you are doing 4 hours later. And you need to test it, and you need to solve almost all of them. I found that, for example, today I was having a village environment, and then they told me to freeze everything. they wanted to talk about lower temperatures and how water when it rains, water in very low temperatures when hit the ground freezes instantly. So in those kind of environments, you have those water spikes creating as waterfalls, and you need to recreate that in 3D. So you need to create a Niagara system and use particles, make an advanced material that can be animated, and you need to solve it. So you need to be a 3D generalist, and the more specialized you are in a certain topic, you can deliver a certain part of the job, but usually you build a scene from scratch, and you need to build completely from materials, geometry, lighting, and everything. And you need to have the whole picture, because everything, I found that in Unreal, everything is so close related that you cannot untie the geometry part from the lighting part, because lighting is affected, or lighting performance is affected by geometry. And depending on the geometry, you need to lead the scene in a certain way. So everything is close related. So having the whole picture for me is very, very important when working in Unreal and in real time, especially.
How many people are in your team?
We are four
Right.
generalists.
Yeah.
We have 3 junior profiles, and I am the coordinator.
Do you all have sort of like the same general understanding and knowledge about the project at the same time, or is it?
More or less, I usually do the advanced topics. I focus mainly on blueprint programming and all that involves real-time animation, not made by a timeline or something like that. You need to trigger it by blueprints or by programming. I usually do that kind of job, or rigging a certain animal or mechanism or something like that. I usually do that kind of things, or advanced materials. For example, the fridge material it was my job in in today's work.
It makes sense. What kind of what would be a job that one of the junior roles would get?
Sorry?
What would be the kind of work that you would assign to a junior role, one of the other people?
Maybe assembling a scene. Maybe it's addressing or having a blocking, or having the environment blocking, maybe.
Yeah. And that would be just laying out structures of where it would be.
Yeah.
Are they getting into textures
Yeah.
and materials? Or that do they have?
Hmm.
Are they working in another DCC as well to build those things, or is it all
Yeah,
just?
in my team, I have one guy that works in Houdini and Maya, another one that works in Blender, and another one that works in Max. So I
You got
have
the whole
different sort
group.
of profiles. Because
Nice.
one of our possible kind of works is about bringing Google Maps geometry in order to have like 3D models of cities, and you need to download, import it in Blender, export it in 3ds Max, and then bring it to Unreal, texture it. Well,
Wow.
it
Yeah.
depends on, yeah.
Right. That's pretty interesting insight, though, especially for
Yeah,
somebody trying to get that
it's,
experience.
it's insane. Starting a 3D show is insane.
Right.
Now,
The
we have
timelines.
more like a, yeah, the timeline is,
Right.
for example, yesterday, 1 hour before we had to do the rehearsal, they removed all our content. Yesterday, we didn't do anything. But today, we needed to have 5 immersive environments because they are going to use 5 different environments. So it's
Wow.
insane. It's and your timeline is more or less 2 hours, 3 hours. It's
Wow.
insane.
So are you using similar pipelines though when you or are these like each one of them's like their own unique challenge?
Yeah.
Right.
I
So
usually focus in. I usually get the final touches to the projects, and I take care about the weather forecast environment. the other teammates usually make scenes that, for example, on Monday they told us they want to have a certain palace for Wednesday or Thursday. They start dressing the environment in order to when we have to deliver it, I get the final touches on it.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that's it does sound pretty intense. I don't know. This is like there's like to have that many hours to get a job done, you definitely need to know your stuff, know what you're gonna get, know the results, and know where not to go, which can be stressful probably. Do you have any thoughts on what Avalanche might offer when they get to when that comes out in 5.4? The Avalanche
Hmm.
plugin. I know we haven't been able to
I,
use it yet, but just curious.
I I have seen the video, and I don't know how they will implement in the Unreal interface, because it involves Niagara simulations and everything in one only interface. So it will be a huge topic um, to study. I haven't time
Oh,
enough
okay.
to
Nice.
mess with
Very good.
PCG, for example,
Hmm.
and Project Avalanche will be a game changer in Unreal, I think,
Yeah, you think so? I'm
for
curious too.
broadcasting, for of course.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's
Mm.
what it's aimed for, that market. Yeah, I know this Logan has been anxiously trying to figure out what's in there too, because it relates a lot to motion graphics and
Yeah.
that kind of department. So, and apparently it might even be built on very similar pipelines to Houdini, or not Houdini, Niagara.
Mm.
So there might be a lot of crossover for what the workflow looks like, which would be very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Does
that
anybody?
it will be a
Yeah,
game changer, I think.
yeah. Well, it's coming out soon. I mean, I think middle of March was when we're gonna. Well, is when they're doing the talk. They're going to do it at the talk at the GDC at Epic, and 5.4 is coming for that. So we're going to find out
But
what it's all about.
they told us that they would release it in completely in certain versions. I think that it will be split up in 5.4, 5, and maybe 6
Oh, okay.
in certain tests. It will not be completely released in 5.4, I think.
There you go. That's news to me. Yeah, I mean, it might just be like, yeah, experimental and then work their
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
up like the other ones.
So it's always interesting, Epic's definition of experimental, because you'll have been using a feature for 4.5 years on several different engine versions. And when you go to enable it on a new project, it's like, by the way, this feature is experimental. And you go,
Mhm. Yeah.
still? Are you sure about
Yeah.
this? We've been dependent on this for many years now.
Yeah, I think they even realize that sometimes. They're like, this probably should be moved beyond experimental, but just haven't done it yet. Okay. Anyone else have anything they want to touch on with the industry differences before we continue on? You ready to keep moving? All right. So, we're going to get to a Q&A at the end here, so don't worry. I know we have a couple questions that are still standing, but let me just cover all this other stuff. Since we go until the another 15 minutes here. If you want to apply to any courses, we have February 28th is our deadline for our March intake, and then we'll have another one in April and another one each month. And if you're doing a private sessions, then you don't have to follow these deadlines. You can start up once you sign up. And we do have some interesting changes and adjustments on how we're going to do our course a little bit in the next month. So keep your ears open as we're going to do those announcements shortly after before the month. And then we also next week on February 29th, which funny that it's on the 29th there, is Logan's going to come and do a talk about UEFN, which is Unreal for Fortnite. That's just been released. Fortnite UEFN was just released just under a year ago. And huge opportunity there for anybody who's looking for, especially as independent artists, for opportunities to make revenue. It's surprising. It's very quiet. It's kind of like YouTube was back in the day, where like, what is this YouTube thing? And then you find out people are making millions of dollars off of it. This is Unreal's Epic's venture into the metaverse opportunity, and they're very much encouraging people to be content creators, and they're paying pretty good royalties for making content. So I personally think it's quite a nice opportunity for people who understand the engine and understand the tools to be able to find freelance work and work independently among people who are demanding for, whether they want custom characters, control rigs, or things that are able to produce their stuff to make it look unique and valuable. And there are people, apparently, from when I heard in September, Epic had given out $10 million to content creators already, and it had only been released for 6 months. So there's plenty of opportunity for revenue there. So take a listen to what Logan's got on his perspective and his experiences. It's still a new and upcoming industry opportunity, and it's well worth trying to. And so I should mention Epic is an educational advisor at Epic right now, so he knows the inside info, what's going on in this world. If you want to ever connect with the school and find out what all these updates are, we've got lots of different ways to stay connected, and definitely join in. And then we can enter the Q&A and find out some of the answers to these questions. And if anyone else has more questions, this is your opportunity to reach out. We do have a few other points that we can talk about as well in addition, but let's make sure everybody's questions are answered. First one I see here is that are real-time artists in demand? And I know that's a pretty open-ended question, but I've kind of just talked a little bit about a new direction there with the UEFN, but I do have if it was me and I was in the situation where I'm just getting into the industry, this is a great window. This is an opportunity that just isn't something that comes around all the time, where you have new tools and new pipelines that are being offered for free, and you can just basically go in there and explore. And the faster that you can become an expert in that area, I think is just a great way to place yourself so that people will actually pay you to finish their work and do their jobs. Does anybody on the panelists here want to talk about their perspective on this?
Yeah, I think I'd like to kind of chime in here. So are real-time artists demand? Say yes, but you have to kind of think of things a little bit more broadly, because a lot of times when I run into people going like, oh yeah, I want to become a, let's say, 3D environment artist or something, they're thinking 3D environment artist on GTA 6 months after I start studying this, making like responsible for an entire environment or something. And I think this kind of goes back to what we was talking about earlier and thinking of the breadth of industries that this actually applies to. Like, yes, there's rules out there, and sometimes like it's not always working on GTA 6. It's well, with a ton of different industries. Like for me, at least, it took me about 3 years until I got to working on just games. Like I initially did, I started off, working on more the mobile and AR and VR side of things. Sometimes making apps to just showcase a product for marketing teams, or working on a Home Depot app at one point, or working on museum installation things for a photo op. And then from there, I switched over to a mix of film and games. And then from there, I was able to switch over to games. And then I occasionally see like folks like just applied nothing but AAA studios. And they're like, oh yeah, no, I'll never get into this because the junior applications, the junior positions for this have 150 other applicants. It's like, they do, but you don't have to enter the industry here. You don't have to start making money at this point. You can jump around, and a lot of the skills are transferable between different fields for the most part. So
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
great point. And I
yes,
think that's
but think it broadly. Okay, sorry.
right. No, I know what you're trying to say there. You're saying, it is open your mind with like all the other ways that you can find employment, gain experience, and really build up your own confidence in yourself. There's a lot more opportunities than there ever was, and a lot more directions. So I think yeah, that's a really valid point.
Yeah, especially as like the last few years, we've seen more and more industries start to pick up stuff in real time, as we've talked about a lot. It's opportunities have broadened even more than before, and now it's just a matter of going, oh, okay, what's using the skill set now? Okay, jump into that, or jump into this, or jump into whatever's needed.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
in general. Oh, wait, go ahead, Zach.
Going off what Victoria said, just to kind of give a different perspective, because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it always sounds like you've been attached to like a studio and
Yeah, that's the other thing. I've always been full time, so there's like the
right.
freelance perspective too.
Right. So like being a freelancer, I mean, I moved to Atlanta about two, almost three, like 2.5 years ago. And I didn't have any 3D experience before then. I had worked a lot in After Effects. I worked a lot with 2D animation and compositing and doing motion graphics. I had a lot of animation, skills, and I didn't have any 3D knowledge. And I came here and I started working with a company that I saw leaning really heavy into virtual production. And in the film world, Unreal Engine has been around for so long, but now the just virtual production, real time is really exploding. And there's tons of production companies out there, and everyone wants to prove that they can do virtual production to score big jobs. And in the film world, especially when you're getting to a smaller scale, commercial work, shorts, smaller budget features versus like those big Marvel projects or stuff like that, stuff moves a lot faster. And jobs pop up, and I myself saw an opportunity because this company was leaning into virtual production. I said, I have to do everything I can do to learn Unreal Engine as fast as possible, because I need to put myself in the best position to be successful. And within a year of being in Atlanta, I was working on set, doing virtual production jobs. Granted, I really pushed myself to learn Unreal Engine and do as much as I can to expand my skills in the 3D space and learning, C4D, Blender. There's a lot that goes into it, behind the scenes. But you just putting yourself, Unreal Engine being as young as it is, and younger artists have a big opportunity to get ahead of the game, versus being, working in a as competitive as a space as like 3D art like Maya, where there's all these artists. Unreal Engine so young still, and there's really not so much of an established, industry, and younger artists have an advantage of like, skipping a few steps and getting, ahead of the game, versus trying to catch up to a 40-year-old Maya artist. Shifting into Unreal Engine, you have a big advantage to, put yourself in a successful position. And, a lot of that goes into networking, and especially in the fast moving space world, you need to have a portfolio full of work, and, you have to reach out to producers and production companies, and you really kind of have to, part of the job is really selling yourself and selling your work. Because producers and smaller projects don't have time to put up a job application and say, hey, we need a 3D world. But if someone knows that you do it already, they're going to reach out to you. Or if someone sees your work online, or anything, you're going to have some knocks at the door. So the smaller scale film world is definitely kind of like the Wild West, like I said before. And being a generalist kind of puts you in the best position to like go over here or go over there, and telling other producers all the different kinds of work you do, because that'll bring more work to your door.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a really interesting, and important way to look at it too. Let's make sure we get these other questions covered. And there's a question here for somebody who's doing more. Well, let's talk about the construction company for looking for in-house ArchViz artists and photo renders and VR experiences. Nicklas, did you have anything you wanted to talk about in that one?
Yeah, I can add a bit to it. So Kyle, you ask about, well, you're mentioning this construction company that wants you to go into ArchViz in terms of doing photo renders and VR experiences. And currently you're doing 3D modeling for animation or games, which is great. But you're asking specifically, is it worth worth it even if you want to do films and games to transition over to ArchViz or whatever? Yes, for sure it's worth it. ArcViz is very generalist approach. So whatever you can already do now is applicable over to ArcViz as well. And when you learn more skills, specifically for rendering and creating lighting and photo rendering and doing something that looks photoreal, I mean, that's what you're probably going to end up doing regardless, in no matter if it's games or VFX or whatever. Obviously, it might be a necessity to learn stylized stuff and for games or whatever if it's not photoreal. Fun fact: if you want to end up working on as an environment artist or whatever for on an Avengers movie, just to take something, the chances are you're gonna, the movie's gonna take place in a city somewhere. You're gonna end up creating buildings that looks photoreal. Guess what? You're technically just doing ArcViz, but you're calling it a VFX artist. I mean,
That's a really good point.
it's just a job title. You're doing literally the same thing, but through a VFX studio or a game studio or an ArcViz studio. It's the same. Doesn't matter. It's very applicable over. So yeah, it definitely translates. Even though I love doing let's just here. Oh, you also ask, how do you study ArcViz without formal schooling? I mean, we literally have courses at CG Spectrum dealing with ArcViz specifically, so that's a great option, I would definitely say. If that's not a possibility for you, I mean, there's loads of stuff online as well, but that does require someone to figure out what's actually new information. And, we all know, I mean, even us as a school, yeah, you can go to YouTube and learn a lot of stuff there, but what do you search for? What is the most newest and current information? Who is even teaching you? Is it someone who actually has experience, or is it just someone who's making up stuff as they go and don't really know what they're talking about? That's the benefit of being at CT Spectrum, is that you get a mentor with a lot of experience in individual fields. And even if it doesn't apply directly to what you're interested to, you have a whole network of mentors that you can definitely ask and get, other opinions and different experiences and all of those things. So, I mean, I think CG Spectrum would be an amazing way to go about it without formal schooling, as you call it.
I just loved. Go ahead, Victoria.
Oh, sorry. I also wanted to quickly add on when with the ArcViz and specifically talking about VR experience for ArcViz, that translates into games really, really well. Get games run into a lot when they're looking for people is there's a lot of people out there who are wonderful animators, wonderful 3D modelers who make things that look great but aren't functional. And VR specifically is one of the honestly worst platforms to deal with. I'm gonna admit, you're like especially if you're talking about standalone VR, you're practically putting the hardware of a phone to your face, rendering it twice and rendering it really, really fast. It's awful to work with. If you have experience working with VR and specifically standalone VR, game studios like that because it shows, hey, you can deal with difficult platforms. You can make things that are practical. You can make things that are actually for commercial projects. It's an easier to transition to games than, say, if you're just coming out of studying 3D modeling and animation for games.
Yeah. There's quite a few people I know who have architectural backgrounds that got hired in a game studio because they just knew how to make stuff that looked like buildings that worked out well. So there is definitely a lot of crossover there. And to reach out to about the formal schooling, I mean, our big thing with CG Spectrum is that our mentoring is what our value is, and having that opportunity to talk to a mentor is what really changes how fast you can learn and what it is you're focusing on. You're not wasting your time. And I don't know, unless there's some sort of stipulation that happens when people try to apply for ArchViz jobs, do they need certifications and stuff? Nicklas, is that a thing? Is there like standards that have to be hit?
There are definitely ArcViz companies that really does want you to be an architect as well. But I mean, they're further apart now. Most don't. I mean, it's just like any other job application. They look at your portfolio and look at what you're capable of doing, and then they judge you on your skill level and not as much your actual, resume, if you will. I'd say even to a lesser degree than VFX and games, where they sometime might require you X years of experience in something for a release game or whatever. Here they're more looking at, can you do, what are you capable of doing? How good are you at figuring out compositions and lighting and negative space and all of those things.
And Zach, there's a question there in the beginning that we didn't really reach out to you about virtual production studio in Winnipeg. Is there any tips or advice that you can offer to let that person get into the industry?
Sure. I mean, so typically in virtual production, if you own a volume, that doesn't necessarily you're not necessarily always creating those environments in-house. Sometimes they're virtual, like if you own a virtual production volume, you're outsourcing, world building and stuff to other people. So what I would first suggest is really get to know what this company does, and what everyone in-house does. If you're looking to specialize in environment art, my biggest suggestion is create as much environments as you can. Having stills, even if they're path traced and they're not real time, having a huge portfolio of environments is what's going to get you environment work. What I've come to see is if you're showing off real time work, you need to specify it's real time, because the quality behind path trace work and real time work is very different. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. At a virtual production level, it for sure is. But have both on your portfolio. You want to show the sexiest stuff and you want to show the most optimized stuff. Reach out to everyone you can at the company, figure out what they do, and just have it as vast of a portfolio as you can. And, going off of what Simon says about the mentors here, I wanted to kind of speak on that a little. Is one of the most valuable thing. You can go to YouTube University, you can learn from there. But I think being part of the community at CG Spectrum, and being introduced at what a pipeline actually looks like at a professional level and stuff that you need to do to pass it on to the next artist or whatever, it's so valuable. And you don't really get a lot of that online versus content creator type content. You can always reach out to anyone at the school at any part of the pipeline and they'll have an answer for you. And it's super helpful as a generalist who's interested with ADHD, and I'm bouncing around everywhere looking at all these different kinds of pipelines. So I'm always reaching out to different artists and mentors and being inspired by other students who are curious too. It's that being part of that community is really awesome, and it does open doors for possible work and stuff like that you don't really get anywhere else. So there's a ton of value when it comes to that. But in terms of the virtual production internship, definitely portfolio. Just have as diverse. If stills, you want motion, you want animation, sometimes as simple as just camera movements across an environment, and just showcase your texturing skills, your material skills. I wouldn't stress out too much when it comes to modeling, because most of the time in virtual production, you're pulling assets like that. And you don't really have time to build them from scratch, depending on the asset. But yeah, portfolio.
That's great. And just to cover a couple more questions here before we close out. Cesar, did you have anything you wanted to add or anything? I haven't really reached out to you yet for a while, but is there anything missing there that?
No, according with formal schooling question, I have learned modeling by a YouTube channel, texturing by a YouTube channel. You can learn those kind of topics scrapping the internet, but in this case, real time, I think that it must be learned in a formal schooling or in a certain structured program. You cannot handle Unreal with YouTube videos, I think, because everything is so closely related that it will be extremely huge effort to make the exercise to bind those knowledge together, because in every YouTube video you will have only a certain part of the picture. It will be very difficult to join all together. So I think for Unreal must be learned in a whole. You cannot make it in several pictures.
And part
That's
of
my
the
opinion.
That's great. And like the part of the thing that we're trying to do with our course is making sure we have a learning path. And that's the idea is we want to make sure that you go through it and you're getting all those missing gaps together so that when you're done the course, you have a good knowledge basis of what you need to do to get your job done. And there's lots of specialties that you can just reach out and branch out and go into it afterwards, but at least you have that core foundations that you can work with.
Yeah.
And answering one of these questions about they took the connector storytelling and the animation boot camp. What Unreal is, what advanced specializations for you. I mean, that really depends on what it is that you enjoy doing the most, whether it's cinematography element or the technical art. We do try to push for tech art in our courses because that is really where the value is, and that's where the job opportunities are. So, I would say if there's anything to specialize, it would be to just to focus on your technical abilities inside of these aspects, and that is going to be most likely to convert into your first job, and then from there you can explore. Pipeline VFX pipelines involved within this, using Nuke and After Effects. I think Zach has a little bit of he was using Nuke plugin the other day and having some luck with it. So it definitely can be part of it, but our course doesn't actually cover that because we have a whole compositing course that definitely talks about Nuke, and After Effects is a thing that might become a much bigger topic once Avalanche kind of releases. And I know motion graphics in general is an area and a subject that we want to take part of, but it's just so new and unusual and weird in this context that we don't really have much to make a course yet. But as soon as I think Avalanche comes out, I think we're going to be able to find a path for our content. But does anybody have anything else they want to add to any of this before we wind it down? There's definitely a lot to talk about, so I really appreciate that we had everybody here, and I definitely enjoyed the learning from everyone else's experience as well. For me, it was nice to hear everyone else's discussions. So I think we're gonna wrap it up now. And I actually don't know how to end the session, so I'm gonna let Zoe take care of that. So thank you for everybody for attending. Hopefully you found a good experience with it along with the rest of us. And yeah, if you have any questions or whatever, make sure you follow up with them and find out what you can about our course. And show up next week for Logan's talk on UEFN, which I think should be very interesting and new for all of us as well. All right, everyone, I'll leave it there. Thanks everyone for being here, and we'll see you again soon.